Well, thank you, Mr Speaker, and quite timely in light of the statements that have just been made by the Prime Minister and the response by the opposition leader on national security, where we are talking about enemies outside of our borders who wish to do us as a nation and as a people harm. And in rising to speak on the Australian Citizenship Amendment Allegiance to Australia Bill, I want to talk about, sadly, those within our borders who also seek to do us harm. Now, the purpose of this bill is to contain those people. It's to officially strip Australian citizenship from those people who, by their actions, have forfeited their right to be citizens of this great nation. And this amendment was announced in a national security statement by the then Prime Minister, the member for Warringah, in February of this year. But now the time has come to debate this bill, and we look at the times we are living in. The atrocities committed in Paris 11 days ago have rocked the world, but they're not alone or isolated. There are terrorist threats and actions being committed in countries right around the world, and we here in Australia are not immune. As in many other countries, Australia has a heightened terror alert level. We have witnessed on our shores an attack on police officers at Endeavour Hills Police Station last year, the siege at Sydney's Martin Place, which sadly resulted in the death of 2 Australians. And we've witnessed the murder of civilian Curtis Cheng, who worked at the Parramatta Police Station, all at the hands of terrorists. And this is not to mention acts that were prevented by the tremendous work of Australia's police forces and security services. To refer to the Sydney Five, who attempted to commit acts of terrorism in the city of Sydney in 2005, the Benbrika Group, who planned the bombing of various sporting events in 2005 and 2006, as well as plotted to assassinate former Prime Minister John Howard. There was a plot to storm the Holsworthy Barracks in Sydney in 2009, and according to the Australian newspaper yesterday, police say 12 men and boys living within the Australian community are capable of committing an act of terror such as killing a random member of the public. Yesterday's article says that they are part of a larger group of 19 men and boys, 7 of whom are in prison. More than 30 people have been brought before the courts on terror-related charges since Operation Appleby launched in September last year, Australia's largest counter-terrorism raids to date. Most of those people have been under investigation for more than a year. That article goes on to say that counter-terrorism consultant Shandon Harris-Hogan told Four Corners the extreme ideology being embraced by the men can be connected back to historic terrorist plots in Australia like Operation Pendennis. Overwhelmingly, individuals have a familial or friendship connection, he said. There is an interconnected network of individuals who transcend operational cells, and within that group there is clear examples of ideology being passed on from father to son, mother to daughter, and between spouses, cousins and siblings. Well, when an estimated 150 Australians have been or are currently overseas fighting with extremists in Iraq and Syria, members of the Islamic State, we have a problem. We have a problem that's right around the world, and we have a problem that's here in Australia. A problem made horribly graphic with a photograph of the 7-year-old son of Islamic State fighter Khalid Sharif, where he held a head aloft, a severed head of an individual. And Khalid Sharif, by his own actions, rejected Australian citizenship. In his instance, this legislation would be a mere formality. When Australians are fighting against their own country and the values that it stands for, they have signed their own ticket out of this country. This legislation, as far as I see it, is just stamping that ticket to make it official. And it's important to note that when applying for a provisional, permanent or sometimes even temporary visa, an applicant must sign a statement they have read and understand the following things about Australian values. And that statement says that Australian society values respect for the freedom and dignity of the individual, freedom of religion, commitment to rule of law, parliamentary democracy, equality of men and women, and a spirit of egalitarianism that embraces mutual respect, tolerance, fair play and compassion for those in need and pursuit of the public good. He goes on to say Australian society values equality of opportunity for all individuals, regardless of race, religion or ethnic background. And it says the Australian language, or the English language as the national language, is an important unifying element of Australian society. These are the rules of entry into our country. They're not just the rules of the game, they are the game. Like any other club, when you break the rules, you forfeit your membership. If you decide that you no longer want to adhere to the rules, then you have your membership revoked or you hand it in. And when the then Prime Minister, the member for Warringah, delivered his national security statement back in February, he said, it has long been the case that people who fight against Australia forfeit their citizenship. Australians who take up arms with terrorist groups have sided against their country and should be treated accordingly. He also said, wisely I believe, taking the issue a step further, that as part of a war on domestic jihad and radical Islam at home, we were going to have to get tougher and make it apply to those without dual citizenship. We should be taking action against anyone who seeks to join foreign fighters and have the capacity to be a citizen of another country. If, for instance, a second-generation Australian can get citizenship of their parents' homeland and they seek to join a foreign fighting force such as Islamic State, take up arms against our country or our values or our allies, then they should have their citizenship revoked because they have another place to go to. But a further problem does remain. What do you do with people who don't have a second country option? And my view is still to strip them of citizenship. They should forfeit all rights of citizenship. An idea, again, which was floated by the then Prime Minister, the member for Warringah, when he suggested suspending some of the privileges of citizenship. Now, we can't make those people stateless because that breaches international law, but we can downgrade their citizenship to a form of perhaps permanent residency or something even less than that, where they would hold fewer rights than a citizen. For instance, we could say that they don't have the right to vote, that their ability to leave or return to Australia would be restricted, maybe with the removal of a passport, their access to consular services revoked, their access to welfare payments revoked or reduced. Now, the member for Warringah said that no one should live in Australia while denying our values and rejecting the very idea of a free and open society. In his speech to the Australian Federal Police headquarters, he said, "We cannot allow bad people to use our good nature against us," and there's a lot of wisdom in that. These measures, both the ones contained in this bill and the further measures outlined above, should not supplant, though, the punishment of foreign fighters or those who are aiding and abetting the enemy or planning to commit acts of terrorism against Australians. It should be an add-on. They should still be punished to the full extent of the law and put in jail. The whole idea of stripping citizenship actually is a key plank in with the Centre for Security Policy, an organisation based in the United States, and I've been reading their document at length, their publication, the Secure Freedom Strategy, a plan for victory over the global jihad movement. It's very interesting reading, and they outline a plan for the United States which includes the revoking of citizenship of naturalised people who, in seeking to insinuate Sharia-compliant norms into civil society, they put the argument they've violated their oath of naturalisation and allegiance and therefore should be deported. And I've got to say, there is also wisdom in that. There is wisdom in that because when you are fundamentally arguing for something such as Sharia law, which is such the antithesis of Australian societies, it's the antithesis of the values that you signed up to when you took out that visa, when you declared that you were going to be an Australian citizen, that perhaps, again, in advocating such an approach, you are writing your ticket out of this country yourself. There are other measures suggested by the Centre for Security Policy as well that are worthy of consideration when the stakes are so high, and I'll talk about them in a second. But firstly, I do want to congratulate the contribution of Queensland LNP MP Christian Rowan, who echoed my call some time ago for a serious look at the reinstatement of capital punishment for those who commit terror acts on Australian shores that result in the death of Australian citizens. It's something that seriously needs to be considered. And a critical question, I suppose, we need to consider, going back to the Centre for Security Policy, in their particular approach about those who advocate for Sharia law in Australia. I've got a question that we need to consider in the context of this bill. What's the difference between the views of a member of a group, say as Hizb ut-Tahrir, and someone who goes off to fight for Islamic State? Both hold the same view of Australian society, and my view is that both of them should be expelled from Australian society. If you believe that we are in the midst of a war, and we've probably been in it for about 15 years now, a war against radical Islam, then you must take the necessary steps to ensure that radical Islam, that the ideology of Islamism, that domestic jihad is controlled and contained at home. You don't want to have to fight the enemy at home as well. We do have people here in Australia who do not believe that we are at war, and I'm going to say some of them are in this place. It's a bit like saying that you're not in a fight when you're getting punched in the face by someone. Islamic State have said that they are at war with us. The radical Islamists have said that they are at war with us. They have declared it a war. We are at war. If another country declares war on us, we'd accept without question we are at war. Australians, like all other free-loving people, they love freedom, liberty, democracy, but those radical Islamists consider us Dar al-Harb, the house of war. It's because we're in a country where Sharia is not enforced. The world, according to their worldview, is divided into two houses. Dar al-Islam, the house of Islam, or Dar al-Harb, the house of war. The parts of the world that are not yet subjugated to Sharia are called the house of war, where it's deemed that there's a perpetual state of jihad going on, or holy war, until it's subjugated and it comes under Sharia rule. So, Mr. Speaker, there is no question that we are at war with radical Islam. Our enemies have declared it so. They have told us it in black and white. And under these circumstances, it's appropriate that we take whatever steps are necessary to protect Australians, to protect our citizens. That is the first duty, the primary duty of government, of national government, to protect your nation, to defend your nation, and to ensure that its citizens are secure. And I do believe that this bill and the measures outlined within it are a key part of that, to expel individuals from this nation who have dual citizenship, can go somewhere else, who seek to fight against us here at home, seek to kill people in this country, motivated by a desire to commit a terrorist atrocity, or the people who go overseas and fight for extremist foreign forces such as Islamic State, which are against the very values that this nation stands for. I commend this bill. I'm glad that it has support on both sides of the House, but I think, Mr. Speaker, that this bill is only the beginning of what needs to be done. It is certainly not the end. We are in a long war here with radical Islam, and it is only through measures that are tough, measures that strike at the heart of the enemy, that we will be able to win this war.
I thank the honourable member